Pink Poodle Crafts, join the Poodle Pack. It's time to get creative and make you laugh. Make your own art today. Pink Poodle Crafts is the way.
What a good boy.
Hello. Welcome to the Pink Poodle Craft Studio. I don't know what this is. It's not a studio. It's a room. It used to be a master bedroom. Not much of a studio. Well, I guess it could be a studio. I don't know. Do you call your art room a studio? Let me know in the comments. I want to know. Do you call it a studio or do you call it a mess like I do? I call it a mess. Anywho, I did the video the other day where I showed you how to make the embossing glazes. And we made a couple. And I said that we would be doing this ATC. And that's what we're going to do. It's very, very easy. And I'm going to show you. So all I did was take a piece of chipboard or, the back of a cereal box type of thing, cut it into an ATC, which is artist trading card size, which is 2.5 by 3.5. So 2.5 by 3.5. And I covered it with some music paper. You can cover it with book paper, any kind of like paper that has some sort of text or some sort of something on it. And that's what I did initially. And so that part's already done. So it's got the music paper on it. And that's it. We're done. Yay. I'm just kidding. And then I took a piece of this napkin. Now, obviously, you don't have to have this exact napkin. But what would be cool is if you did have a black and white napkin of some sort. I think that would stand out really well. Or some tissue paper. If you had black and white napkin or tissue paper, because as you can see the music paper behind, but then the black and white looks really cool over top of it. So in the background. So, yeah, if you have something like that, that would be awesome. Now, if you don't have something like that, if you have rub-ons, like black rub-ons that are flowers or something, you could put a couple of those on. If you know how to doodle, you can do that. And it shouldn't matter whether it's a waterproof pen or whatever, because we're putting embossing powder over it. And it typically should be fine because the embossing ink is pretty thick and it's not going to make it run. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. So you can do a little bit of doodling with like a fine point pen or something and make some flowers or some leaves in the background and or a stamp. Oh, I didn't even think of that. Well, duh. Just use some StazOn and a stamp or two. That's the easiest way, honestly, besides this. So, I mean, I don't know why I thought a stamp so last. I was like, duh, of course stamps. So yeah, so you can use stamps and black ink. Yeah, anything you want. So you don't have to have napkin or tissue. There are ways around that. Not a big deal. I happen to have the napkin, so I'm going to use it. Because why not? So last time I took a piece out of here and it had like a leaf going up and all that because I was trying not to put something on that was too big. But what I may do is I may put I don't know if I want, and I'm just kind of sort of looking here. Let's see. What about this one here? Yeah, maybe I'll just put like this flower part on here. So what I'll do is I will cut this. Just cut this piece of the napkin. Now napkins usually have like 2 plies. And usually the first one's usually easy to get off. And you can usually split it very easily. So, this one does. This is the one that's only 1 ply. So this one didn't have another ply. Either that or I had already taken it off. But if it does have another ply, the second one's usually harder to get off. But if you wet your 2 fingers with your tongue, like lick your fingers and do that, it'll kind of make them stick to each finger, and you'll see it'll separate and give you a chance to pull it apart. I learned that trick recently, and I was like, oh, duh. All this time I'm doing it with I'm ripping a corner to try to get it apart, or like some people use like the tape method. All you have to do is lick your 2 fingers and go and push it together and pull it apart. And it like on an edge or a corner works best. This part of the napkin where it's like got usually that texture, There it'll be harder because where it has that texture, the reason that texture is there is to kind of hold together through that, you know, the little embossed thing on there. So it's going to be harder to get it apart if you try that wet finger method. And your saliva works best, believe it or not. Like water doesn't work as well, I found. Saliva, I guess, is stickier, so it works better. Anywho, enough about that. We're just going to place this on here, and we're going to modapage, or decoupage, or whatever you want to call it. We are going to stick this sucker down onto the ATC. And when it's a napkin, because it's very porous, and the glue is going to soak right through, so you can put it right on top in the middle and just work your way out, and you'll find that it'll go on smoother and won't wrinkle as much. Just make sure you get as close to the very edge as possible. And I mean, you still might get some wrinkles, but you'll have less tearing issues when you do it this way. I find that it doesn't tear as easily as doing it the opposite way. It can be a little challenging to get all the corners down because you got to put a little pressure and let it sit there for a minute so that the glue really soaks into it. Also, putting your hand on it's not a good idea because you'll see if it gets stuck like that in the middle, you could have a problem because it could take up the paper. So you want to press down. And see how it did? It ripped because my finger was on it. That's why I held it on the side, because I don't care if it rips there. Try to make sure your fingers don't have glue on them. See, I'm picking it up. But it's not ripping. I'm just having, if I hold it by the sides, that'll work a little better for me. But it's better to have more glue than not to make sure that you get those edges. You don't have to curl them under, but you can if you want to. But usually I just make sure you get like, you want your edge to kind of like fold down like that, because then you know that it's on the corners really well and the edges really well. And you know that it's like sealed, you know, it's sealed down. So if it's, that means you got the edge wet, and that means the edge is, you know, the edges are going to be nice and adhered down well if it's kind of sinking downward, because that'll help you get it all the way around. And it's not rocket science. If you mess it up a little bit, who cares? This doesn't have to be perfectly neat. I'm not telling you this because this has to be perfect in any way at all. I'm just telling you that for tips if you want to do decoupaging in the future and you have things that you want to decoupage and you want it to be perfectly neat. Like, I didn't rip any of that because I put the glue on top. For some reason, you put the glue underneath and it weakens it, and then you're taking glue and putting it on top, so that's 2 layers of glue instead of letting the top glue seep into the, you know, into the background. It makes it a little less fragile, and it'll not rip, you know, because I don't follow my own advice half the time, and I do it the other way, which I've done for years. But I know the right way to do it, like I just did, but for some reason, like, I had to forcibly go, okay, I keep doing this way, and I used to not do it that way. I used to do it the right way all the time when I did actual, like, decoupaging, and then something happened in my brain, and it's like, I don't know, I got lazy, I guess, and I just started doing it however, because I kind of like wrinkles in it, and I don't really care, but I kind of had to force myself back into the habits of doing it, you know, the right way. And you'll still get maybe a wrinkle here and there, but it's a lot less likely to get wrinkles this way. Like, a lot less likely. And if you're real careful, you won't get any wrinkles. So we're going to hit this with the heat gun, and then we're going to cut the excess off, and then we'll be ready for the next step. So just give me a second here, and we'll give this a good little dry. You're going to dry it up real nice like. I'm going to make sure that I turned the gain back down on my microphone because I had it up earlier. If it's too high, then my heat gun sounds too loud. And this won't take long to dry at all because it's a thin tissue. As long as you don't soak it with glue, you know, you'll be fine. Like, it's pretty much dry now. Sometimes I like to hit the back end. and then redo it. All right. So what did that take? Not even a minute? All right. So some people like to tear it off at the end. I don't really like to do that because sometimes I've found that I've ripped it off the thing. So I like to cut it. And if it gets a little stuck to the back because the glue kind of, like when you were getting it over the edge, you could just, you know, peel it off the edge. It'll peel off the edge pretty easily. So just peel it a little bit off the edge. And then go along and cut your excess napkin off and throw it away. Because it ain't no good no more. You can't use it to blow your nose. It's going to be all full of glue. Don't do that. You'll have glue and boogers on your napkin, and that ain't a good combination. We don't want that. We don't want no glue and boogers. No ma'am, no sir. So, if I can get this peeled off the side there. Okay. Oh, here's a piece I forgot. Oh, that was just stuck on there. So, now what I do is I just give it a look-see and make sure the edges are all stuck down. And, you know, because we are going to put embossing powder over it. So, and it's not really going to matter that much because the embossing powder too, as you put it on, will seal it back down. So if you do have any spots, it'll kind of, you know, it'll kind of seal it down anyway. But, you know, I still like to make sure. So I just go around, I just make sure there's no major missing things. And as long as you usually get it around the edge real good, like when we were gluing it, it'll not do that. So there we go. So there's our napkin. Okay, it's over the music in the background there. So the next thing I did was all I did was ink the edges, I believe, and that's it. Yeah, because I think that's all I did was put a little ink on the edges. I might not have even done that, actually. I'm looking at it now, but I'm going to ink the edges on this because I can't remember if I did or not. So we're going to ink the edges. And you know, some people like their ATCs rounded. You can round the edges. It doesn't matter. I sometimes will round the edges on mine. Oh, I missed a little piece of paper. So you can ink the edges or not ink the edges. It's kind of up to you. Some people like to, some people don't. You can cut the corners, you know, make it rounded. But we're going to make it go from that to that pretty easily. And we're going to put those little gold flakes on, which is an optional thing I just kind of did. You know, the thing about embossing an ATC or anything, like anything large that you're embossing, it has a tendency to, see that little bit of a bow curve it has? When it's warm, you can, and I advise you to, hold on to the edges of it and kind of pull back on it and blow cool air. So I'll be doing that, and hopefully I'll remember to tell you about it, that I'm doing it. But I was thinking of a way, like, how can I make it so that I keep it like flat on here, and like after I initially get the first layer on, because like, or actually, you know what? I have an idea, because you can always reheat this to then, because if you try to straighten it out when it's like really dry, it's going to crack. And in fact, you see the couple cracks in there, right there, those cracks, which I actually like in this. And sometimes it's fun to kind of purposely crack it and then go back in and put some ink in there. Maybe we'll do that. But yeah, you can put cracks in it, but don't think that, oh no, I just cracked it. No big deal. Once you reheat it, all those cracks will disappear and it'll be perfect. So unless you have some specialty, like, unless you're embossing something in a certain way that you can't, if you reheat it, it'll kind of ruin it or something. Yeah, if you're just doing something like this, you could just throw some heat on it. It'll re-melt, but it could re-curl again. So you want to, you know, I got mine that's actually pretty straight considering, because a lot of times when there's this much embossing powder, it will curl like that. So you just got to keep that in mind. But that does not bother me. It might bother you, but that little bit of a bow does not bother me whatsoever. So I'm not really concerned with it. And I've tried bending it back a little bit before doing it, which really didn't do anything. I don't know. Okay, so Our embossing powders. So we made a couple embossing powders. This was one of them. And what was the other one? Which one did we make? Which one did we make? Oh, I think it was this one because it was the one and it looked kind of green, right? Is this it? No, because we did it. No, because we did a thin one. Oh, this one's right here. Duh. Jeez. This one, which was like an orangey color. I'm probably going to use some those colors too, but trying to remember. My brain's like mush. Trying to make sure I remember exactly. So now that it's dry, I haven't touched it since we did it because I wanted to leave it, you know, raw in here so that you could see. Now you can see that there's this is the ultra fine or the really fine. And it's like now back to being, you know, nice and dusty, but there's a few clumps in it. And all you got to do is, and really for this method of what we're doing, it doesn't matter if there's clumps in there. And I'll show you why, because we're not doing anything precise, which is not really what the glazes are for. The glazes are not necessarily meant to stamp an image and then emboss it with. They're meant to do like interesting designs or full coverage things like this, like what I did here. That's kind of what they're meant for. They're meant to put an overall kind of like different effect on it, and you could play around with this and play around with the different things you could do with it. But it's not meant for like stamping images because obviously it's not opaque, so it's really not going to show up very well if you try to stamp something with it. It's kind of pointless. You could do like through a stencil or something and do like a resist technique with some of these and get that glaze, and then, you know what I mean? That you could do, but again, that's more of a like overall design rather than stamping necessarily. So anyway, I'm going to start off, and what I'm going to do is I am going to put some embossing ink. Now, if you do not have embossing ink, which embossing ink, they make all different kinds, and I have bought in the past like several different kinds of embossing ink. Right now I'm looking around on my desk. Where did it go? There it is. I've bought several kinds of embossing ink, and for some reason, I will say that in this case, Versamark is the best embossing ink. But basically all it is glycerin. It's just glycerin. You know, the, vegetable glycerin. I'm trying to find my bottle of it here. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, that's not it. What did I do with the bottle of glycerin? It might be hiding. Ooh. Avalanche. I was going to try to show it to you in case you didn't know. But most of the time, if you go to your grocery store, go to the pharmacy department, like where you get like aspirin and stuff. Whoops. I'm knocking things. Here it is. Good Lord. I'm knocking things over. I didn't need to. Anyway, this is it. It's called vegetable glycerin. And it's, oddly enough, when I first was looking for this stuff years ago, everybody kept saying, oh yeah, you can find it at Walmart. Some people said something about it being in the cooking aisle. It definitely was not. I've never seen glycerin in the cooking aisle. That was weird. Or like the laundry aisle, somebody said. I looked everywhere, couldn't find it. Well, come to find out, I went to the store I went to the front of the store, talked to a clerk, and they got the manager because they didn't know what it was. And the manager said it's in the pharmacy department, and every store I've ever gone into, that's where it was. So if you're looking for glycerin and you're like, I can't find it, A, you can get it on Amazon. B, if you're at the grocery store, look in the pharmacy department. I can't tell you where in the pharmacy department, but if they have a pharmacy person, like a pharmacy in there, you know, like a lot of stores do, just go up to them and ask them where the vegetable glycerin is. They'll be able to tell you. So that's that. And it's usually like less than $5 a bottle. So if you have an old embossing stamp pad, maybe it's dry, maybe you don't like the way it's working, or even if you have a foam pad, it's got to be a nice soft foam pad, not those hard fabric pads like not the Distress ink pads, which are that fabricy, felty fabricy pad, not that. It has to be the soft one. So if you have an extra ink pad, maybe you have an ink that ran out and you can wash out the pad, which you can do. If you run out of ink on something and you don't plan on getting the refill for it, you know, like one of those ink pads that are soft, you can even do the ones that are like the hard foam or whatever. But anyway, if you have an old ink pad, you could run it under soapy water and use it, you know, for that. But anyway, you would take some glycerin and put some drops of glycerin, take something like a credit card and kind of swoop it in and like work it into the pad, and until it's, you know, until the glycerin, until you keep putting drops on and the drops aren't sinking into the pad very well as you're pushing it in. Once it's saturated enough, then you're good. But that's all you need, because that's all this is. I don't think, I mean, who knows, there might be something else with it, but even Tim Holtz and everybody will say, you hear them say, you know, it's a glycerin, you know, pad, and that's basically all it is. So if you need embossing and, you know, stuff, get yourself this. This is like an easy refill. And I found that ever since I started doing that, it works best. I've gotten other pads that in the past that weren't like this with the glycerin. In fact, let me see if that smells the same. Well, I've put a lot of stuff on that. Yeah, it does actually smell the same. Actually, this pad that I got came with a refill, so I've been using the actual Versamark refill because it came with it. But I didn't need it. I planned on using the glycerin, and I have used the glycerin in the past, so I know it works. Anywho, so you can take your pad and basically you're gonna just go over it all over. Oh, I shouldn't be doing this on there because that's where I'm gonna put the excess powder, and I don't want it to stick to that page. So just go all over it. You don't have to rub it, just press it, and it doesn't have to be like absolutely perfect because, you know, we're gonna heat it from underneath because we want to get a good application on there. Now remember what I said in that video that I did, that if for some reason our colors are a little too dark, we can use, you know, a clear, just a clear to lighten them up. So I've got my clear up here ready to go, and what I usually like to do if I need to, because I'm gonna test this out a little bit. I'm gonna put a little bit on and test it out, and then I'll add more because I haven't really tested that out and it might be a little too dark. So if it is, there's a few things we could do, which actually, you know what, I will test it out, and this will stay wet for quite a while. I'm gonna test it out on this because I can't remember. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna test it out, but I'm gonna take this and heat it from underneath, but I'm only going to put enough of a layer to cover this. I'm not going to put like piles of it on, which I wasn't going to do anyway, but what I'm going to do is like this, and whatever sticks, like I got a clump in there, doesn't matter. So I have like a thin layer, but I want to see how that thin layer will dry, and if I need to, I will add some clear, I was going to say white, and I'm still going to heat it from underneath because you'll get less blowing around. So let's let this heat up a second. Let's see how dark it is. If it's too dark, then we're gonna do a different route. This is the one that looks green, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, this one might be too dark. Yeah, see, I don't want the overall color to be that dark. So I made these a little too dark. The first ones I made are not that dark. So I'm going to use, actually I'm going to use one of those. I'm going to use this one, I believe it is. Yeah. I don't know which one. Let me just test this and see which one. Sorry, I don't remember which one had the browner color. I'm spreading it out a little bit because I don't want it to be too thick. It's got a little bit of pink in there. Must have dropped a couple of kernels. Okay, so that one's slightly dark too. I think what I did, I was trying to remember what I did and how I applied it. I think what I did actually was put some regular clear on first and then added my color. I'll show you how. That's what I was trying to remember. I was like, did I just start with the colors first? I didn't. I started with some clear. So I'm just going to take some clear and sprinkle it over the whole thing like this. And just do a layer of the Beauty. It doesn't have to be perfect in any way. I'm going to pat off as much of it as I can. Not because I want to take a lot off, just because I just want a very minimal starting point. You know what I mean? I just want a starting layer, and I don't want it to be a thick starting layer necessarily. Okay, so, and it could be the UD or it can be the thin, fine powder. It doesn't have to be the UD. Whichever one you have, this will work fine with either. So I'm going to heat this from the top for this, but the rest of it we're going to heat from underneath. Well, sort of. I'll show you. Sorry, I forget that quickly. I just did that ATC, I did it what, 4 or 5 days ago, and I already forget how I did it. So let me just heat this just to get that initial clear layer on there. Because that's what I did, I believe. I hope. It doesn't have to be completely cured either. It doesn't have to be completely liquefied. As long as it's just on there where nothing's flaking off, it's not even fully done. See, it's still very crystally. That's fine, because it doesn't need to be at this point. It can just, as long as it's on there, it doesn't matter. So now what we're going to do is, I've got these colors, right? So I like the fact that that pink was popping out in there. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use similar colors. I might even throw a little bit of this in because it was interesting. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to, okay, so because the heat gun might be on, so it might be hard for you to hear what I'm saying. I don't know if it is. Now, this is pretty much dry, right? So when embossing powder is wet or, melted, when it's still hot and melted, you can add embossing powder right into it and it'll just stick to it. So you could, if it's really, really hot and stuff, you could just take a pinch and you can add it to the wet or melted embossing powder, but you have to do it quickly. Otherwise, you have to put it, now since we don't have embossing ink on here, we only have the dry powder, you don't need the embossing ink if you can heat it from underneath. And that's how I got the effects on this, because I did a little bit of clear on top like this, and then I took, which I'm going to make sure there's not a whole ton of that on there. And then I took the colors I wanted and heated it from underneath. And until I started getting some full coverage on here, then I laid it down and I would let it get hot in areas. I'd do a little area where I was oh, I want a little color on this one. And I would heat this area a little bit. Of course, the butterfly wasn't there yet. I'd heat that area and take a pinch of the pink color here and I'd put it on and keep heating it. You see what I'm saying? So just in case you're not understanding what we're doing as I'm doing it, that's basically what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to take some of this and I'm just going to start in some spots. And now I could, because the clear is I can keep heating it and adding to it, but because there's not a full layer, I'm going to start off by doing this, where I just put a little bit here and there and heat it from underneath. Now I'm just sprinkling it with my finger. And, don't worry about if you waste it, because you're going to mix a bunch of stuff together. And I did that, and this is what my end result was, what's in here. I just kept putting it in here. It's just a little bit, because you're going to sprinkle it, and some of it's going to fall down, but you're not going to have time when this is wet to keep stopping and putting this back in. So it's not going to be enough to be oh, I'm wasting it. Don't fret over it. It's homemade. It's a little bit goes a long way. I wouldn't worry about it. But just sprinkle, start out by sprinkling some little areas where you want to get started, and then take it and heat from underneath to get it to, get fluid. And it's easier if I hold it like that. And yeah, just be careful of your fingers. So do one side over here, and then, go to the other side. And you only have to heat it until it starts to attach itself. Then you can do it from the top. So that's starting to attach itself there. So I'm going to go over here and hold it. And now try to get this side. And if it's too hot, use some tweezers. And really, we're just concerned about the, the parts that have the coloring. And I don't know if you could see the coloring. It's just a pale because we're not trying to cover the background and make the background. I wish this would focus. Oh, there we go. See, it's like spotting and giving us some color in spots. It's kind of cool, right? And so I think I'm still over here. I may have to do a little bit because if I heat it from the top and try to throw stuff on there, there's not enough for it to attach to yet. You know what I mean? Like it has to be able to attach to the melted powder. So I'm actually going to take a little of this color here, which was that turned out green, didn't it? No, that's the one that turned out like brownish colored. So I'm going to pop a little bit of this over here. And I'm not putting like it's kind of a process. You don't want to put like piles and piles of it on. You just want to give like little sprinkles and slowly work it, slowly build it up. And just let it get melted enough so that it attaches. And then, because you don't want to burn the other underside. Now I got like a bubble in there. You'll see that bubble? I don't know if it'll focus on it. You can kind of see it, that bubble there. Once you put it down and start working, you can work that bubble out. It's not going to be there all, so don't worry about it if it starts to dry like that. You'll work it out. So over on this side too, I don't have a lot of anything here. And then this I think is the last time. Then I'll be able to do it from the top and not have to worry about holding it in my hand anymore. Or you can use the embossing ink. That's fine too. Just put it in a little spot. Put your powder on. Just don't put it in like blocks. Put it on, like, even take your finger and put your finger on and just kind of tap it to get it where you want it so that so it doesn't, if you don't want to do it where you're holding it, you know what I mean? Then you can do it from the top, until it really gets a layer on it. All right, so, wait a minute. Let me put a little bit of this color right there. Okay. It's bubbling a little bit. That's kind of cool, that bubble. Oh, it's shrinking. I thought it was going to stay. All right, so now it's got enough of a layer on it. And I'm not trying to put such a thick layer that it's crazy. That's why I'm doing little sprinkles. I'm going to actually dump this a little bit just in the garbage can, just so my thing doesn't get stuck to my paper. So now all I have to do is heat a spot, take a little pinch and put it on. Just have your pinch ready or know what you're doing and heat, shut it off. Throw a little in and then heat it and then do another spot, if that makes sense. It takes a little practice, but it's really, really easy. So I'm going to have a pinch ready. I'm going to, let's say, heat right here. And when I see it start to get melted, I'm going to do that. I'm going to drop a little bit of this on there. Not a lot, just a little. And now it's connected to it, so it's not going to fall off. So now I can heat it back up and now it's, it's on there and you got your color. So you just do that basically around the piece until you're happy with how it looks. So I might do a little bit more of this orangey color right here. And you don't have to turn it. If you know how to do it, you could just move it, sprinkle it down. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to shut this off if you're coordinated enough to do it that way. You just want to get to it, fairly quickly. You don't want to let it sit because it dry. Like the embossing powder cools very fast. And you'll see it's a very subtle color because you're just sprinkling on with your fingers. So just build it up slowly so that you don't get, too much. Because once you put it down and melt it, there's no way to get it off. So, do it quickly so that, or do it slowly, so that you don't, make a fatal mistake and you're, get pissed off that you ruined your piece or something, Try not to dump, you know, a whole pile of it on. Try to sprinkle it, you know, in between your fingers like that. It's slowly getting colored. Slowly we're getting color on there, which is good. I'm going to start throwing a little bit of pink in there. I like the orange and the pink. It might come out cool that way. I didn't do orange on the other one. And this one's a thicker one, so be a little bit more careful with that, because that, especially if it's a dark color like that and it's in the UD, it's going to be, you know, a little bit chunkier. But all you need is a few kernels, especially of a dark color, and see how much you get. You get a lot of color from it, especially if it's a dark color that you've made. So, and I really like the way it spots like that. I love how it gives that spotting. It's just, to me, that's the coolest thing. Add a little bit of the orange. And what's cool is you'll see the color, especially a dark color, that's more easy to see, but you'll see how when it's melted, it'll kind of blow the color around a little bit, so you can kind of almost mix the color a little bit, which is cool. So we're starting to look good. Let's see, let's put a little bit more of actually this color down a little bit. A little bit more orange. Kind of like that. I might put just a little bit more pink and darken the pink areas up, but I like that pretty well. And look, it's already got that shine to it. We're gonna go over it with one good heat so that it all kind of makes sure that it's nice and even. But first I'm going to add just a little bit more pink, and then we'll be done. Okay, so see what I mean? There's not like a ton on there that it's a big deal. So the only spot that I see that I'm not thrilled with, there's a little spot right there that I need to, like, it's like a little divot. Just gonna add a little bit of like a clear maybe, because otherwise it looks pretty good. Now if you get done with it and you look at it and it doesn't have like a, you know, it doesn't have to be perfectly even, like you'll see if I can get it in the light here, it's not like, you can see that it's not like perfectly glass, but you can also see there's that little divot right there. When it passes over, I could see it when I look at it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of clear in there, and that'll gloss it over. It's still pliable, and it will be for a little bit, because this is where like it's cool to the touch, but it's still warm. This is where you can start to bend it, and what you want to do is bend it back the opposite direction and just sit and hold on to it and blow on it with cold air. But sit and just do this. It might take a few minutes, but it'll keep it from bending too much the other way. But, you know, and blow on the underside too. And the top. And just like keep, you know, and also bend it this way. But you want to like keep it bent so that, you know, bend it the opposite way while it's malleable and warm, so that it will hopefully not warp on you very much. I mean, because it's cool to the touch. I mean, it's hard, but it's just still warm enough where you won't crack it by doing this. But once it sits for 5 or so minutes, it's going to be completely, you know, completely hardened. So I just sit and do this and then do it this way until it's at least mostly cooled down. So I'm not even going to worry about that spot actually, because I got this cooled pretty good and I don't want to have to worry about it right now. I'll probably end up covering it with the butterfly anyway, so it doesn't matter. So I'm just letting it cool, and now it's starting to get to the point where it's getting hard and cool, so it could, you know, just be careful when it gets to that point. But, you know, if you can just keep it held for, you know, a few minutes, if you have the patience, which I barely do, but it'll save it from being too warped, because I've seen, you know, I've done it before and it's warped pretty badly. So, but this helps a lot. And I just keep blowing cold air on it, and I do it from underneath, and you'll have less warping. I don't know if you could prevent 100%, but you'll have a lot less. And I'd rather it actually bend the opposite direction than, you know, bend the other way. And again, if it does get too warped, like I said, just reheat it, and then, you know, reheat it gently, and you'll be able to have it soft enough where you can do this. So if you're like, oh, I forgot, you know, just go back and before you put any kind of your embellishments on, try to do this before you put any of your embellishing on, because it'll help. But I think that's pretty good. It's pretty straight. It's not bad. In fact, it's bent the other way, which I'm happy with, because then if it does warp a little bit inward, because I think the embossing powder shrinks as it dries a little bit, which is what causes it to kind of warp towards the middle. But if we're doing this and we got it like this, if it does bend towards the middle, it's going to straighten out completely. So that's kind of a good thing. So, but I think we're good. So I really like that. Isn't that cool looking? It looks like I mean, yeah, can you get this effect by kind of inking the background and then putting a clear on top? Sure. But I like the way this effect is, because it's almost like the background. I mean, you can't get this. I don't think you could get this exact effect. You can get a similar effect, but the fact that it's got like this watercolored spattering look to it, it almost looks like the background is like watercolored, if I can get it to focus. You see that? It looks like it's got watercolor on it, which is really, really cool. So that's the part I think is kind of neat. So I'm going to toss that in the trash and move these out of the way, because now all we have to do, we got our color on, and it looks, I made the pink a little bit more prominent on this one because I thought it was cool looking. So now I'm just going to clear some of this excess, because now that I've been you know, you're going to have embossing powder all over your desk for sure because it's going to fly around. So, but it cleans up fairly easy. Just take a baby wipe and kind of gather it just so you have an area to work. All right, now, don't be warping on me now. That's fine. So now what I did was this butterfly is a punch. Now you might not have the same punch, and that's fine if you don't. I'll show you which one it is. Around here somewhere. Oh, here it is. So it's this one here, and it's by Recollections, and it's 1.5 plus. I don't know what that means, but it's just a butterfly. It's got like an open thing to it, but it's by Recollections, so you can just look up Recollections butterfly punch. I'm not sure they still sell it because I don't remember when I got this. I don't even know if I bought this. I don't think I did. I think somebody either bought it for me a long time ago or I got it somewhere. Maybe I did buy it. If I did, it was many years ago, but either way, any kind of butterfly punch will do, or it doesn't have to be a butterfly. It could be a fairy, any little thing. You don't want anything too big because, you know, oh, I forgot about the gold. Duh. Oh my God, I'm so stupid. I'll show you how to do the gold because I'm an idiot and I forgot. Duh. Because I'm sure somebody, if I don't do it, somebody's going to go, you were going to show us how to do the gold. So if you have that gold flake leafing stuff, which I have some in here, all you have to do is the same thing you did with the embossing powder, where you put a pinch on. Now I have to reheat it a little bit, but that's fine. I just would get a little pinch, and you want to be careful not to get like a huge pinch. And what also was helpful too was a little pair of like long tweezers, because you could take like a little pinch like this and kind of shake it off. And you want to make sure you do not get that heat gun air in there. So you can like you don't want a whole bunch. You just want like a little bit. And then you can just go in and heat a spot. And drop it. And it doesn't have to be down perfectly, which this, you know, it doesn't have to be down like perfect flat, because we'll fix that part afterwards. So if it's like sticking up in areas, don't worry about it. We'll fix all that. So just basically get a little bit of it stuck down in a couple of spots where you want it. But like that's a little too much of a clump. You know, you don't want it to be like so big. You just want to try to get like a little chunk. And then I'm trying not to touch necessarily my tweezers. And this might have been too big. So I'm going to pull off a little bit of that. I didn't realize it was kind of folded up. There's a good little bit. And I'll use these other two, which are probably going to blow away, so I'll put them here. Take another little spot. Tap it down a little bit. Don't worry about if you get the embossing powder will come right off of your tweezers once it's dry. And don't worry about making marks in it because we're going to smooth it out. So then I'm going to take a little bit more, put a couple little pieces here so I can make sure they're separated because I don't want big pieces. And I'll grab a piece. And again, don't worry if it's sticking up a little bit because we're going to fix all that. As long as it's just like attached, it doesn't have to be attached like to perfection. But that's all you got to do, and you can put, you know, put some gold leafing down. Now this I might pinch down because it's like little tiny shards. I'm not going to touch the embossing powder. I'm just going to scoot it out of my thing and just let it sit where it is, and don't worry about it going all the way down because we'll fix that. And if a little bit, you know, a piece of it flies off because it's, you know, that's fine. Let it do that. You know, while you're still heating it and stuff. Don't fret over that. No, just put a little bit more right here. Touch the embossing powder. Use your tweezers, kids. Because it's hot and it will stick. It's like melted plastic sticking to your skin. Alright, so once I've got my desired pieces, I'm going to give that a second to cool. And then we're going to kind of heat it. And I might take a little bit of the embossing powder, the clear, and just go over top of it if it's sticking up a little too much in any place, so that, you know, that's why I'll put a little bit in here so it's easier for me to get it out. You know, if it's sticking up a little too much, I'm gonna heat it, I'm gonna cool it again and keep doing this, even though I'm just gonna heat it anyway. Just make sure it's cool enough so that I can then just kind of go over and like kind of, you don't have to use that. You can use your hand, and just any flaky parts, like just scrape it off with your hand. So like anything that's sticking up or scrapey, you know, major, just scrape it off so that it's not a pain in the ass to put it down. Just use your nail. Don't worry about putting marks in the resin. No, in the embossing powder, because we're gonna fix that. So, all right. So I'm just going and scraping off any major parts. All right, we're all good. I only got a little bit came off. Okay, and now I'm gonna heat it. And you don't have to. I mean, it's fine. You know what I mean? But if you want to just, you know, put a little bit of embossing powder on there, you can, by just doing the same thing we did with the color, basically, just over the gold. Just put a little bit and then heat it. Just a little bit. It's not, you're not going to be able to make it like a perfectly smooth over top of all the gold foiling, but you're not really looking to do that. You're just looking to make sure it's stuck down really well. And it'll kind of submerge itself under the hot embossing powder anyway. So. Just give it a once over. That's it. And then that's when you're gonna sit and cool it off now. So do your gold foil first if that's what you want to do. You don't have to do the gold foil. It's not gonna, you know, it'll be fine either way. That was just something I just decided to try because I've done it before where I've put it in and I thought it looked kind of cool on this ATC, but again, you don't have to. So now we're going to redo that thing where we hold it and, you know, bow it down a little bit and blow on it because we want it to cool flat again as much as possible. Do it from the corners a little bit. Like the top is cool to the touch where it's okay if I'm grabbing the corners and stuff. I just want to ensure that this is going to not look wonky. As long as it's warm at all, you want to keep doing this and hold on to it. Because you might think, oh, it's fine. I did it, you know. But I'm telling you, even if you think it's done, no. As long as it's still pliable, you have to keep holding it like this. Because it'll make a difference, trust me. You might think, oh, you could tape it down. I don't even think taping it down. Plus, you run the risk of ruining your embossing powder with tape. But I was thinking like maybe there's a way to like put double-sided tape on the outside and like a little bit in the middle and then like stick it just to here. And if it rips a little bit of the chipboard on the back, it's not going to make a difference. You know what I mean? But you know, it's not going to be a big deal. Or even take like hot glue if you use like a line of hot glue. But see, you'd have to do a whole, like all around the edge and then stick it to your glass. It'll come off and then you can just peel the hot glue off and you might see like a little bit of like a layer of the paper come off. But it's the back. I mean, throw some paint on it or stick another piece of paper on it. You know, it's just the back of it. Who cares? I mean, my back looks, you know, messed up anyway. I don't care about the back. I'm not one of those that gets like, oh, the back has to be all this perfect. And I just sign the back and be done with it. And at least the back is, you know, you could see what I did it on. And it, you know, oh, see, oh, I cracked it. See, it's getting too, see what I did? I cracked it. Well, that is very, very easy to fix. So don't freak out. Just sit here and do this and it'll completely fix itself. It's almost like regenerating. My embossing powder is moving away or sinking into the crack. So let me. It's sinking into the crack. That's kind of cool looking, actually. That it did that. It's actually neat how it kind of did that. That's interesting, huh? That might be something interesting. Before I put embossing powder on there, I want to play with that a minute. What if I did that? Here, that's too malleable still. There we go. Let's try that side too and see what happens. And like, that's still malleable there, but here it's not. See now, now you can't see that white like there, but let's see if I heat it. See, this is how you discover stuff, by making mistakes and then figuring stuff out. That's so cool. See, because I was going to put some more colored embossing powder in and just seal it back up, and it would have been perfectly fine. You would have never known, but I kind of like that. So I kind of want to let that dry or melt or, yeah, cool and crack it some more because I think that's really neat. Obviously, you don't have to, but I think that's kind of cool. I might put a color in like an ink in there and see what happens. And then put another layer of clear on top. Because I like the cracks, so I want to let it cool enough so that it'll crack. It's not going to crack if it's malleable, if it's still, you know, warm, but because I was talking about that before, how I got these cracks, but these cracks, I didn't bend it all the way like I did on this one. This one, like you could see, I accidentally just like bent it. So I just realized I had to do that. Whereas this, I just bent it ever so slightly and it just cracked the very surface. So it's interesting how that paper did like that. So I'm hoping to do it again because now I want to see. Because this is how you experiment. I can fix it. So it's not like it's damaged or anything. And I think it looks cool like that. If I can get more of these cracks. I'm fascinated. I like them all. I like how they're all going in the same kind of direction. So I'm going to stick with that. Like it's kind of like a design. That's still malleable right there. Right there it's not. That one still is. won't crack right there. Let's see. I think once it gets to a certain point, it won't really crack anymore because the other cracks are kind of like making it bend, so it's harder to get it to crack. But I got some decent cracks on here. And I could still fix this. It's like if I wanted to go back the other way, it's fine. I just add a little bit of color in the areas and then put my clear. But now you can see the light hitting on like all the cracks. Now they're going to turn out like this when I heat them all, so you'll really be able to see them. But I thought that's kind of cool looking. Well, that one didn't. That one didn't either, really. How come these are sealing up, but the other ones didn't? Huh. Oh, that one is a little bit. That's weird. They didn't all get white like that. Huh, I wonder why. Maybe it's the gold. I bet you it's because this is right before the gold. I bet you because most of them were going through the gold, maybe that's what held it. Interesting. Very interesting. Well, since I can't get it on the whole thing, I'm just gonna now fix it. You see what I mean? Like, it's no big deal because now I'm just gonna heat those areas, fix it, and it'll be good to go. This one, what did I have? Oh, it was this one actually. You just might have to go over it a couple times so that it fills in that crack. I actually gave it a cool, that actually gave it a cool look. It made like, the embossing powder went into the cracks and kind of darkened them. Isn't that cool? So that's interesting too. See, it's interesting. You learn some interesting things when you mess around. Oh, I kind of like that. That kind of gave it a different look. Oh, that's interesting. See, you learned something. But you can always kind of mess around and figure it out. Obviously, you don't have to crack it. And if you do get one crack, you can just fix the little crack and then, you know, break your mother's back. So, I got embossing powder everywhere when I was doing that because I accidentally, at one point, grabbed a pinch and then dropped it while the heat gun was blowing directly in the area I dropped it. Real smart. All right, so... well, because of that, because I did do all that bending, it's not probably going to warp as much too because of the bending. I'm assuming it probably won't. I don't know, I could be wrong. I'll cool it a little bit and do this, but it looks like it's more bending the other way, which is really interesting and cool because, you know, maybe that'll prevent it from warping at all. Okay, so anyway, back to the punch, because I was talking about that as I was still grabbing that and not paying attention. So I punched one at a book page, right? And then I took a piece of cardstock, whether, it doesn't matter what color it is, and I also punched it out. Now, you can try to first glue the book page onto a little piece of cardstock and then punch it out, but it might not go through the punch. So I would do it separately, and it's pretty easy to glue them together because if you just put some glue on, it'll kind of slip into place and it'll be, you know, pretty it'll line up like fairly easily, especially because it's like a little bit of an intricate design. You don't have to use an intricate design. You can just, as long as it's not real big, you don't want it to be any more than like a third of the size of your ATC. If it's, you know, half the size or bigger, it's gonna, you know, that's too big. So you want to keep it like a third of the size. You don't want to put it right in the middle because that's too like conformed, you know. You want to put it like off, you know, and because there's a flower here, like off to either side, you could put it up like that, but I think that's leaving too much stem. And I think the best place for it would be like right about here. So because it's kind of a dimensional ATC, the wings are up and it's just glued in the center, but I'm not going to glue it yet because I'm going to ink it, and this doesn't have the embossing powder on it. And you know, some people might say, oh, well, you should have put embossing powder on it. I don't think that looks as nice, because this little contrast of this matte versus the shiny, I think looks better. If you were to emboss this, and then it'll get lost on there. So the fact that this will be a different color, I think is interesting. Or a different finish, it's going to be more interesting to look at, pleasing to the eye, such and so forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to ink it up with, you know, it doesn't really matter as long as it kind of doesn't stand. You don't want it to stand out so much, because the point of this particular thing is that the background is that was because I, instead of gluing it down, I heated it up with the embossing powder and plopped it down, and then I never pushed it in. So it kind of sat on top, and then it was dry, and I was like, oh, I forgot to like push that in. So it didn't actually, I didn't adhere it properly. So I have to reheat it a little bit to do that. So when you do yours, you're going to heat the area. And then plop your butterfly in without getting the wing. No, it's not hot enough. Make sure it's very hot. And hold it. And I didn't press it. I just sat it, and then I didn't even push down like I just did with the wings. I just kind of sat it and was doing something else and forgot to push it down with tweezers or with your hand even. Just don't get your wings in. So yeah, make sure you do that. That's why mine came off, but normally it wouldn't come off. And I put mine way down there for some reason. It's fine. But anyway, so you're just gonna plop it in. Oh, mine's coming off. Oh, because I didn't let it see. I think I have to hold it the entire time. I think that's why. Let me put a little more embossing powder on that so that it really has something to hold on to. I'm gonna put more of a little pile in there. And then I'm going to heat it. And I'm going to take the tweezers and I'm going to hold it down. And hopefully this time it works. Because you really want to let it cool and hold it like almost the entire time. You can use glue, obviously, but this will work just fine if you do it right. I didn't have enough embossing powder on there, and I wasn't holding it down. And if it does keep coming off, then just use glue, you know, but it shouldn't. It should be fine. Just make sure you have enough. Now that'll be fine. Okay. So, what was I doing? I don't remember. Oh, the butterfly. Anywho, so you want to obviously color your butterfly, because if you just sat it on there, I mean, I've seen that. I've seen people do like journal pages, you know, and obviously they're maybe a beginner, and I'm not saying that they're at fault or it doesn't, you know, theirs didn't look nice or anything like that. I'm just saying I've seen people do like a cool background, right? They'll do like a really cool vintagey background or something, and then they'll take their item that they want to make their focal point, and they don't distress it. They don't kind of make it match anything in the background, and they just put it on and glue it down, and it's like it doesn't go. You know what I mean? It's not, you want whatever distressing you did to your background, you need to do that same distressing. Now, it doesn't have to be the same color. It doesn't have to be, you know, you don't have to distress it so it matches the background and sinks into the background to the point you can't see it. But you want to do the same amount of distressing, even if it's different colors. So you wouldn't do like, you know, that's why I said like, you know, I'm not going to put embossing powder on this and make it look exactly the same because then it's going to get lost. But this, it has similar colors, but it has a little purple, whereas this don't have any purple. It's got a little bit of a difference, but it's still distressed similarly, if that makes sense. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to go back to that purple because I really liked it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a little purple. I'm going to grab a little of this color here first. This is what I usually, this is my Gingerbread by Versa Magic. And I usually would go over the whole thing to really kind of give it a distressed, just a like older look. And I'll do the back too because the wings are going to be sticking up like I did the back on here. Just so that, you know, you want to cover your bases. You don't want to leave anything for, you know, anybody to be able to see that it's not fully done. So always do, especially if you're going to have something that sticks up, make sure you do the back. Just give it a little distress like that. That's fine. And then I'm just kind of, this is like an almost dry one, which I like for things like this. I can just do an overall kind of distress. And then I've got this purple, and now this has got some Winkostella stuff on it, or something. I don't remember what I used on there. I didn't make this butterfly at the same time as I did the ATC. I made the butterfly long before. So I'm going to do that. And don't worry, I'm going to, you know, that purple won't be so dark in a minute. And let's see. Got like this kind of a coral color, which I'm going to do like in the middle here. It'll kind of match that pink a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is take a baby wipe, and because that's awfully dark and these are water soluble inks, I'm just going to pat it off a little bit, or just a little bit, not a lot, just to kind of make it not so dark. Like that, and then I'm going to dry it. And let's see, I'm going to add a little bit of the brown around the edges. So we're going to ink it with the darker brown now around the edges of it. So this will kind of define it. And I'm just going to run that along the edge. And it'll go along and come where it'll be actually on the edge. So it's not just running like the perfect edge. It's actually going up over the edge a little. And then these little holes, you want to define them as well because they're also edges. They're just not on the very outside. So it's hard to do with something like this, but you don't have to be perfect with it. You can get the idea just by, you know, being a little sloppy and just going in. It'll kind of give the illusion that the edges of it are all, the little holes are all done, just by doing that, like so. You see what I'm saying? So you don't have to be perfect. Now I'm going to go back in with a little bit purple because I did lose my purple a little bit. I'm going to just add a little of that purple back in. You just gotta play. Layering is so important when it comes to mixed media. If you're not, even to your embellishments, if you're not kind of layering things as you go, doing a little bit and then doing a little bit somewhere else and then kind of coming back in and adding a little more to give it that like layered look or that like finished look. Like if you just throw some color on there and just be like done without adding a little extra something, you know, and always, like, if you're doing vintage, you could do purple and pink and still do vintage. Do your purple and pink and add your browns on top or your light browns over top to kind of dull it and make it look vintage. That's how you get a vintage look, but it's still, you know, it's still got some cool coloring to it, kind of like this. Because I don't like just brown and brown and brown and brown. You know what I mean? Like, that gets boring when it comes to vintage. Because just because something's vintage doesn't mean it's completely brown. There are plenty of things that were colorful back 50, 60, 100 years ago that if you see them now, they are still colorful. They just have a brown, you know, that kind of look over top of it or with it. So you can't knock all color out just because you want to make it look vintage, because they had color back then, you know. Maybe not like TV didn't have color back in the 50s, but, and movies in the 40s or whatever, but they had color. I mean, everything was colorful, even though in our brains we don't think, we can't. And you know, it's weird. I can't picture, like, when I like think back to the 1800s, not that I was alive then, but like think back to like what it must have been like and stuff. In my head, it's black and white. I can't seem to fathom color. Isn't that weird? I don't know if anybody else thinks like that, but I'm weird. Like, if you think back to how it was in like 1910 or something, does your brain automatically kind of assume everything is black and white and like brown and gray and like that? Or do you actually think of it in like full color? I mean, of course, if you know, think about it for more than a second, you'll be like, yeah, of course I think of it in color. But, you know, but for your first instinct is to, I think most people, is to think of black and white kind of situation. I don't know. So now that is colored the way I want it to be, I'm going to add a little Wink of Stella, or you could take a little Stickles on your finger and just kind of go over it a little bit to give it some sparkle. Or you don't have to do that at all if you don't want to. You could just leave it the way it is if you don't like sparkle and you're not into that. That's a silver. Where's my clear? Do this one. This one's not one. Wow, nice brush. Okay, maybe we won't do that one. Let that brush get that way. Okay, I don't like, these are weird. I have had that happen a couple of times with that brand. I don't know why. Okay. I don't know if there's anything in this, but I guess so. So I just kind of did it haphazardly on the other one and just went around, like, just around the edges, kind of. I didn't do the whole thing. And the Wink of Stella, by the way, or these are like sparkle pens or sparkle paint pens or something. It'll just give a little slight shimmer sparkle. It's not super, super in your face. So I did that part. I'm going to dry that real quick because it doesn't take much to dry that. And it's dry. So now you can add your rhinestones and then just put it in to the embossing powder or glue it. I'm going to put a couple rhinestones that are pink. I think that looks cute. Let me see what I did with my pink rhinestones. Here they are. These are a little darker. So I will just use my glue and my little doohickey to pick a couple of these up. I just need like 3. Trick is, can I get 3 to flip over and be the right side up? There we go. I guess I can. And I'll just put a little line of glue and pop these in. And then, oh yeah, and I put a little sentiment, and I put 2 more rhinestones there, so we can do that and choose a little something something. I did a small sentiment because obviously it's a ATC, so it's a little. Let's see. Will that fit across it? No, I'll do this one. We'll do Become Your Best You. Don't fly over there. I need you. Come back. And of course ink it, because you don't want to just lay it down. And also because it's so stark white, that's the nice thing about this gingerbread color. When it starts to get really, like, you know, down to its last legs, you can basically just color over and give it a little bit of a tea stain, so that it's not so stark. And it'll come, you can't tell because the camera don't pick little subtle things like that up very well. And then I could take the darker one and go around the edges. So this way it's not so, like, there's a difference between that. Hopefully the camera will show it. Between that and that. I'm not sure if the camera picks up the different, not really. In real life it does. IRL, in real life, you'll be able to see that it's totally different. Much less bright. But you can still completely read it and everything. So, now I will tell you that if you glue this down and you for some reason decide to kind of do this, like move and like it, you know, to get it to uncurl for whatever reason, these are going to pop off probably, which is why I ended up putting them on with the embossing powder. Now they will be fine if you don't do that and you just leave it on there, it'll stay just fine. But you can also do the embossing powder with this too, because you can heat a little area and take your tweezers and plop it down and then move it real quick. And if it gets crooked, you can just heat it and then move it with your tweezers. So it's pretty easy. Why am I putting this? I'll put this one here. Now I just, like I said, I folded the wings up a little bit and I just put glue on the body, like on the underside of the body. And then I will take 2 rhinestones and put it on either side of my sentiment, which is crooked, but that's okay. That's all right. Hey, go. Okay. There it went. And this glue will dry clear, so you won't see the little white from the glue after it's dry. But there is our ATC. How cool is that? Easy peasy, right? But don't be afraid to sit and play, and you know, if your background comes out a little different, you know, make it work for you. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can make it, you know, you might discover, you know, that you like, you know, the way it comes out when you do it, because if you do something a little different, it might come out different. You know, just play with it. I mean, they both look, you know, different but the same, you know, kind of, because they're obviously the coloring's a bit different and this, that, and the other, but they both look cool. They're very similar and easy to do, very easy with your new embossing powders that you made out of some clear embossing powder and alcohol ink. And if you haven't seen that video, I will link it below in the description. So just look there if you want to see part 1 on how to make the embossing glazes, which are really easy. Like I said, all you need is some clear embossing powder and alcohol ink and you are good to go. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to my channel. Most of the people that watch my channel are not subscribed, so just, you know, give it a subscribe. It ain't gonna hurt nothing. Nothing's gonna explode or happen. I'm not gonna infiltrate your life if you subscribe. So don't worry about it. If you want notifications, because it doesn't even do that, just subscribing just, you know, makes it so that every now and again I might pop up in your recommendations or something. But if you want notifications that I am either going live or have a new video, make sure you hit the little bell icon and select that you want to get, because once you hit the bell, it should open a menu and then it will say, you know, do you want to get notifications? And then it should send you notifications either through YouTube, like the notification bell thing on the home page up at the top of the screen. It should send you a notification either there or through email, and I think you could choose which one you want it to go through. So just do whatever you check the most. But it's a good way to keep up on what I'm doing and what I got going on. It's a good way to do that with all of your YouTubers that you like to watch, that, you know, whether it's crafty things or whatever. It's a good way to be able to make sure that you're not missing something, because YouTube isn't going, just because you subscribe, YouTube, that does not mean you're going to get any kind of notification when I have another video. So that's why if you really want to see what I'm doing next, I mean, if you don't, then that's fine too. But if you do and you want to see something and you don't want to miss it, then it's good to hit that bell that's next to the subscribe button. You know, hit subscribe first, make sure you're subscribed, and then hit the bell and make sure you click that you want to receive notifications. Otherwise, you'll get my videos once in a blue moon. Unless you watch my channel a lot, regularly, normal, unless you're seeking out my channel and watching it a lot, the algorithm of YouTube is not going to give you much of my, you know, content unless you hit that bell. Also, give it a thumbs up if you don't mind. I'd appreciate it. Share it as well if you know anybody that, you know, any crafters or people that you might might find this interesting. Then, you know, shoot them, just hit the share button below the video. There's a button that says share, and then you can share it to Facebook or Twitter or whatever, or you could just copy the link too. Just hit the word copy next to the link that pops up, and you can just copy the link if you want. So share it if you don't mind. Yeah, I'm having an auction on Monday, the 3rd of February at 4:30 p.m. So if you're around between 4:30 and about 10:30 at night, I do an auction. I have crafty items, handmade items, kits, fabric, books, all kinds of like things good for mixed media, journal making, sewing, all kinds of stuff. So make sure you come check that out. I do giveaways every hour, and it doesn't matter whether you buy something or just come hang out. You'll be eligible for giveaways. So come check that out on Monday. And other than that, I have links in the description to my Patreon and all those things where you can support my channel and get classes. I do all kinds of classes, and we have a private Facebook group just for my Patreon people where we do swaps and all kinds of fun stuff in there. So definitely check out the links that are in the description, because there might be something in there interesting for you. So thank you if you are subscribed. Thank you so much for being subscribed, and I appreciate you. And I hope you enjoyed this video and it made you happy. Have a good day, everybody. Make sure you do what you love and love what you do, and be nice to people. Bye!